I'm Mitch. I use he, him, his pronouns.
I'm Amy. I use she, her pronouns. And sorry about the weird glitching. It seems that whenever we start to record this, it freezes for a minute and then it picks back up. So thanks for dealing with that.
It just adds character. It's fine. Our question of the week this week is, what is the most fun Zoom interaction or like FaceTime interaction you've had during quarantine? So for me, I was actually able to attend my friend's college graduation yesterday, in that her parents made her walk across their back porch and they handed her her diploma, and like they played Pomp and Circumstance on the Bluetooth. It was a whole thing. And there were people in attendance through Zoom from like 7 different countries and like 8 different states. So it was really, really cool.
That's amazing. So I don't have anything as like sentimental as that. I've been doing game nights over Zoom with friends, and we've talked about Animal Crossing a few times here. I've had a lot of fun visiting my friends on their islands, and we've played like hide and seek in our museums, and it's been a lot of fun. So I would definitely say our game nights and our visiting each other on Animal Crossing.
Have you done the flower watering parties?
Yeah, and I got golden roses out of it. It was thrilling. Yeah.
Yeah, Kim and her friends, like, it's like a set thing they do every day is go to each other's islands to water each other's flowers.
The first time I got the like crescent moon sparkle, it was amazing. It was amazing.
So much fun.
Oh my
Well, so this week we are going to be talking about some stereotypes and myths that exist for our communities that we personally belong to. So for me, I'm going to be talking about myths surrounding the trans community, specifically trans masc, but and then Amy is going to be talking about stereotypes and myths around the lesbian community as well.
So we'll get started. Mitch, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to help kind of shed some light and some education on these, okay? Okay, so number 1, do you need to have full transitional surgery in order to be trans?
Absolutely not. We talk a lot about how language has grown and adapted, and even I would say 10, 15 years ago, the language that was still used for the trans community was transsexual. And we have moved away from that to transgender because transsexual implies the fact that you have to have had like gender affirming surgery in order to be valid. And it also makes people like have to talk about genitalia and things that they maybe aren't comfortable and don't need to talk about. So the switch to the terminology has made it a more overarching theme. It's really important to acknowledge that, especially in rural areas, there's a lot of barriers to accessing gender affirming healthcare. Gender affirming healthcare, that can mean hormone therapy, that can mean hormone blockers, that can mean advanced speech training. A lot of trans women go for speech therapy to work on the pitches of their voice, there, as well as gender affirming surgery. Whether it's reconstructive or plastic. That also being said too, not everybody wants to have surgery. Like that doesn't align with their goals of their own transition and the path that they're on. It's a very deeply personal and unique to the individual experience of what steps they want to take to really feel comfortable in their body and in their identity as who they are.
Awesome.
So Amy, is a relationship less serious if it's a same-sex relationship?
Absolutely not. I cannot tell you how much love there is between me and my partner and between my neighbors who are 2 women who are married. It's no less serious than any relationship between a man and a woman or a man and a man. We came together because there was that attraction and there was that desire to get to know each other, and it doesn't disappear or dissipate just because we happen to be the same gender. I cannot tell you how fiercely I have seen same-sex couples love each other. It does not diminish the amount of love that's available to give. Mitch, does allowing trans people to use the bathroom that matches their identity lead to violence and threats made against women and children?
This is actually a very prevalent thought pattern and idea. Like, this is an insidious way that a lot of people use their legitimate fear for the safety of their children overall to allow them to maybe make misguided and intentionally or unintentionally harmful assumptions. So the fact of the matter is, there are 0 documented cases of a transgender person ever trying to harass someone, assault someone, or any such thing in a public restroom. So what there are cases of is the latter, where trans people are disproportionately victimized in spaces like bathrooms, locker rooms, things like that. The reason that happens is coming from a place of fear, and it's cyclical based on this stereotype. But the fact of the matter is that when a trans person is using the bathroom, they just need to pee and they want to wash their hands and they want to leave. I can't tell you how many times. It tends to be when I'm on a road trip and I'm at a truck stop that somebody thinks they need to take it upon themselves to talk to me in the bathroom and try to see if I should be there. It happens all the time, and it's really scary. So it's something that a lot of people act on, but the fact of the matter is it's just not true. And frankly, the best thing to do in a public bathroom is mind your business, and please wash your hands for at least 20 seconds more, preferably right now. But yeah, trans people just need to pee.
Yeah. And fun fact, if you sing the Golden Girls theme song, it will be a good marker of how long to wash those hands. Mitch and I shared that meme with each other as soon as it came out. Yeah, and I think that's a really good thing to bring up, is the fact that like you're just trying to live your life, and it's a really difficult situation to be in when people think that they need to give you their 2 cents when you're perfectly happy without those 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If everyone could just mind their business when it comes to things like that, I think we'd all be better off. So, Amy, so are lesbians who dress more femininely not real lesbians?
No, that's not the case. And so Mitch and I go and we do a lot of what we call safe zone training. And in this, we talk a little bit about all the different terminology that's in the LGBTQ community. But a huge piece of what we talk about is the fact that like clothes don't have genders. Clothing is just cloth until it's on a body. And every single person in the universe dresses according to how they feel comfortable. So I am no less of a person for dressing in what makes me feel comfortable than you are, Mitch, for wearing what makes you feel comfortable. And that changes all the time. My big joke is that like I can either look super put together and like ready to march into that courtroom and help somebody with an order of protection, Bieber like circa 2012. Like it just really depends on what I'm feeling that day, how comfortable I am, and it doesn't make you any less of a person, any less of a straight person or a homosexual person or a gender neutral person, just because you're wearing the clothing that makes you feel at your best. So no, there is no marker that makes you more or less of a real lesbian just because of how stereotypically you may fit into a role.
Gender expression is not inherently connected to gender identity or sexual orientation. It's kind of its own category, right?
Right. And I mean, we could talk forever about the history of society thrusting those gender roles upon people. We're not going to do that because that's not why you're here, but we probably will in the future because it's something that Mitch and I both get very spicy about. And it's just,
there's a lot of history to it.
Yeah. It goes deeper than what we'll do to you guys today, but no, you are not more or less of a person or a lesbian or a gay man or a straight man or a straight woman just because of how you're dressing. So, Mitch, what do you say when someone would say something about how if you're trans, you're not a real man or a real woman?
Well, speaking to the previous point, right, of how you are no less dependent on like the way other people perceive you to commit to your identity and to be who you are. This is, a hallmark example of that. A real man is a person who identifies as a man, and a real woman is a person who identifies as a woman. And a real person is a person who identifies as a person. Nobody gets to dictate who you are and whether or not you're real, except for yourself. And speaking to that too, there is a lot of like, oh, if I don't do certain things a certain way, I won't be accepted. I know that during my transition, there were a lot of really, really well-meaning trans men who wanted to act as my big brothers and like mentor me and like get me on the path to achieving my transition goals. And as part of that, there was an expectation put upon me to give up certain facets of my identity, to give up certain things that I enjoyed doing, to like, sign and send the card in for my subscription to masculinity. But since I can remember, I've been anti-toxic masculinity, and I'm also very anti like being anything other than authentic. So I canceled my subscription to masculinity and wrote my own zine, right, on what masculinity was going to look like for me. I'm still a real man, but I'm a real man who exists in my own confident form of masculinity for myself. Nobody gets to tell you who you are, and you don't have to like tick off those boxes to be real. If you identify that way, you are, period. It's that easy.
And I think it's important to bring up the fact that a lot of people, when they're starting to go through that coming out process, there are a lot of people, whether they ever even speak to a person or not, there are a lot of things that go through a person's mind when they're trying to come out. So a lot of that giving up pieces of who you were to become who you want to be, there is a lot of that trying different things on and trying different ways of dressing and doing your hair and speaking and carrying yourself and the way you interact. And that's okay, and that's normal, and that's part of the process. But it is not an expectation that you need to fit into a single mold in order to belong to this community, because the entire point of the LGBTQ community is that we have been ostracized and set aside because of being as different societally as we are, when the fact of the matter is that we're just people trying to live our lives. And it's okay to try on different pieces of personalities to see what feels good to you, but it is not an expectation. And the LGBTQ community celebrates diversity and all different types of existence, and you don't have to fit into a mold in order to be in this community. And I think that's the beauty of the LGBTQ community. So for those of you who are kind of trying things on and trying to figure out who you are, know that you can be exactly who you are in this moment with a new identity moniker, and you don't have to sacrifice pieces of you in order to belong.
Yeah. So Amy, in a lesbian relationship, is there always one person in the male role and one person in the female role?
No, we're both women. That's the point. We've talked about it a little bit earlier, but gender roles are societal creation. we're both very happy being the female in our relationship because it doesn't diminish the love that we have. It doesn't diminish the fact that we've still got a household that has to be run, and we still have pets that need to be taken care of, and dishes need to be done, and laundry needs to be done, and we got to mop and clean, and I can help my partner install a new staircase just as easily as she can help me do the laundry. So no, there is not a man and a female, because those are basic life skills that everybody needs to have. And if we wanted it to be a male and a female relationship, we wouldn't be in this video right now. So that's a very common misconception, especially when in a relationship there's someone who is more masculine presenting and feminine presenting. But no, neither of us is the man, neither of us is the woman. We're both the women, and we're just going through day-to-day life.
I have to be a brat and hit the pause button because my supervisor is repeatedly calling me. So can we put a pin in it and either pick up where we left off or start over in 20 minutes? So is it my turn? It's my turn, right?
It's my turn. I had another question about a myth that is usually perpetuated. So I wanted to know what you say about people saying that trans individuals are confused or trying to trick people.
So it's a part of the coming out process for people to be confused. But when people say that trans people are confused, that's not what they're referring to, right? To call a trans person confused is to basically say, I know who you are better than you know who you are, which just isn't possible. At the beginning of the coming out cycle, someone may experience confusion about who they are, or it comes with a realization that maybe they don't experience the same feelings as other people, things like that. So that part of the stage is normal and healthy. For you to start realizing by saying, I don't feel comfortable doing this isn't something that resonates with me, that confusion is normal and acceptable and totally part of the process. For somebody else to call a trans person confused, though, is just a really underhanded and demeaning way to talk about somebody. So also the wording of people being a trick or a trap, that is anti-transgender violence. Those are the words of people who want basically permission to kill transgender people if they find out that they're transgender. Those words are specifically linked to very violent movements. So a trans person is not trying to trick anybody or trap anybody. Usually that language tends to get used for trans women who are trying to date. And are they trying to trick men into dating them when men may not be open to dating a person of trans experience? But that's not on the trans person. That's not something they're doing wrong. That's not their fault. That's not a trick or a trap. It just means that the person that they're trying to date maybe is not a great person, honestly. And definitely not a right person for them to have a healthy relationship with. So it's really important to get away from this language when you're talking about other people. And when you hear people making those kinds of jokes about trans people, shut it down. A big part of allyship is I'm a trans person, right, who speaks out on behalf of the trans community, but trans people shouldn't be the only people shutting down that kind of language. We need our allies to really speak up when they hear stuff like that and let people know why it isn't okay and that it isn't okay and that you don't want to hear it again. And also too, like if you see a trans person like at a bar or at a date and someone is making them visibly uncomfortable, please intervene. Be like, hey, I haven't seen you in a really long time. How was that movie you went and saw last week? And get them out of that situation without addressing the aggressor. That is a great way to literally save lives. Don't be afraid to be nosy if you realize someone's in danger in a setting like that. I've done it before and I will do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, that goes hand in hand with something that we talk about pretty often, especially in our safe zone trainings, of like, you're not coming out just one time. Once you come out once, you're going to be coming out for the rest of your life. And a lot of that has to do with assessing safety. So I'm not tricking somebody by not divulging every single facet of my very private life, but I'm assessing for safety first. Mm-hmm. And if I don't feel safe telling you those more intimate parts of my life, I'm not tricking you. I'm just not safe. And I think that's a really important message to drive home.
That reminded me that another caveat is that a trans person doesn't need to disclose that they're trans. Some people choose to live their lives as what used to be referred to, I'm not sure if this is the current language, stealth, which just means that that's a part of their identity that they don't publicly communicate. And in cases like that, in any case with a transgender person, just because they've disclosed to you that they're trans, that's not information that you can share. For me, so when I was approaching dating, I had an online dating profile. That's how I met my fiance, is through OkCupid's amazing algorithm. And I very clearly let people know that I was trans because I was comfortable doing that. And I'm a very open person, but that's not something that should be expected of people. No, I didn't have to do that. Nobody has to do that. I chose to do that because I was comfortable doing that. But that should by no means should be an expectation.
Absolutely.
So Amy, my next question for you is, do lesbians hate men?
No, we don't hate men. We just don't want to date them. The same way that most people have a type, some straight men don't want to date men. That doesn't mean they hate them. So that's a really common misconception. And it also gets really closely tied to feminism. And people who don't understand feminism or who are angered by feminism will typically use language like calling people a feminazi or calling people just like an angry dyke, things like that. So that kind of language is a red flag, first and foremost, but also it is not anything to do with having a contempt for the opposite sex. It has to do with attraction. And, you know, there are plenty of men in my life who are very near and dear to me. One of my best friends is a man. Two of my best friends are men. And so, I mean, I've got you you're like, we call each other Wonder Twin. I mean,
we're family at this point.
I don't even know how we managed to march through life before we met. And then I've got a friend from high school who is an angel and I love him to pieces, but I don't want to date him. And it has nothing to do with hating the opposite sex. It just has to do with attraction and how the chips fall.
Quick follow-up question then, too, because this is another thing that I hear all the time. Because you're a lesbian, then does that mean that you're attracted to all women that you interact with?
So no, and I'm laughing because I have a very specific type. Like, it's a miracle I've managed to find more than one person that falls into this type. So I like, my type, I guess, is a very tall, androgynous woman who may have at one point in their life been in some sort of uniform, so military or law enforcement. It's the most specific type you can get. And it is a miracle that I have not only found one person, but multiple people that fall into this type. So no, we're not attracted to every single woman the same exact way as our heterosexual counterparts are not attracted to every single straight person. We have types. We have specific things that we appreciate or that we're attracted to. And that's just, I mean, it is literally no different than any other relationship in the world, except for the fact that we both happen to be the same gender, the same sex. So no, we're not attracted to every single woman. It's not a risk you need to be worried about. It's not, you don't need to be like, oh, well, I'm a woman and she's a woman, which means she's totally into me. Because like, if you're not a tall androgynous woman who happened to be in a uniform at one point in your life, you're probably like not even on my radar. So I have a question for you.
Yes.
We hear a lot of times, especially in the line of work that we do, because we work with kiddos, we hear a lot of times that people say children aren't old enough to know how they identify. I just see little Riley whiskers.
She's about to start barking at me. Yep.
There she is.
Lay down. Thank you very much. You're very sweet. Thank you.
Oh, we love having our fur babies with us.
If I hold her hand, maybe she won't bark. So I'm going to hold her hand.
I need you all to take a real quick break. I had to deconstruct one of my dog's stuffed animals while we were on our call because he likes to chew the paw until a hole pops out and the squeaker comes out. But then that means like the cotton starts coming out. So quick shout out to all of our parents who are in quarantine right now with actual kiddos, because my dog is sassy and has been driving me up a wall at times, and she doesn't even speak. Yes.
So I give you guys so much credit for everything.
It's so much.
So children all children, right? They begin to form their sense of self about the age of 3. By the time that they are in school, they're really starting to figure out how they fit in the world. And a lot of what children do is look at the people around them and compare themselves to other people and see how other people do things. And that's how they start to form their ideas of who they are. So when a kid is around people, they are going to find things that ring true for them and are things that are comfortable for them and that they like. And those are the things that they're going to start emulating. And they know that it's comfortable and they know that that's who they are. What actually ends up happening, though, a lot of times is an adult or other kids don't like that kid is, maybe behaving in that way, maybe emulating certain things, and they traumatize the child into not doing it anymore. So for example, I think we all have heard in a toy store or the toy aisle at Target, a kid picking out something that they really are drawn to and that they really want to play with, and the person with them saying, oh no, that's for boys, or oh no, that's for girls. No, just like clothing, toys really don't have a gender. And what that has then done is made that kid feel oh, there are things that are off limits. There are things that I can't enjoy. And so that's why they end up kind of honestly morphing themselves into the role that they feel expected to fulfill. I know that was very true of me. Growing up, my one outlet was being in the Girl Scouts, and I was always so excited to go to camp to do the things that the Boy Scouts were doing, like canoeing and learning how to do fires and stuff. But all of the girls in my troop, who are lovely women and still incredible friends of mine, were much more interested in that's how I learned how to finger knit. That's how I learned how to paint nails, which I can do very well. I just don't feel like that's something I want to do anymore. Like those were the activities that I was expected to join in on, even though they weren't activities I wanted to do. So kids know who they are. It's no different between whether they're cis or trans, and like trying to impose things on them is only going to cause them harm in the long run. Giving them the room to explore and supporting them and allowing them to have like the natural phases of childhood where they discover and find new interests and new things to be passionate about is like the best way you can demonstrate to them that you're going to love them no matter what. And trust when somebody tells you who they are, whether they're a little kid or a full-grown adult, believe them. People know who they are way better than anyone's outside perception of them is ever going to be able to recognize. And then, okay. Amy, my next question is, so if a woman is tired of dating men, can they choose to be a lesbian so they don't have to date men anymore?
So, no, that's like a super difficult question to answer because it is a very personal choice who you date. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a really dangerous language to say that being in the LGBTQ community is a choice. I know that for me personally, it was more of a choice to pretend I wasn't for a really long time. And so when I finally did come out, a lot of people felt kind of blindsided because I made an active decision to figure it out on my own and meld myself day to day in order to get through until I really figured out who I was, if I felt safe, if it was what I felt confident living day to day. So I made the choice to come out, but I did not make the choice to be gay. And I think that that's a really common misconception. And I think it's really dangerous to do that because it's a really easy way to tell people that their lifestyle is less than and that they're somehow wrong and they've made the wrong decision. And it's dangerous rhetoric to get stuck into, especially for our younger people who are trying to come out and trying to figure out who they are and figure out who their safe spaces are. Because there is another misconception that it's easier to be in a same-sex relationship or be a part of the LGBTQ community when it's not. I mean, it's the same amount of work regardless. And we said earlier, you're coming out every single day for the rest of your life and you're assessing safety every day and you're making decisions based on your identity that a lot of our straight counterparts don't need to. And so it's not a choice because it would sometimes be easier to be a straight cis person. So I think it's important to realize that it's not a choice, and that a lot of personal thought and feeling and decision making and questioning and concerns and anxieties and all those things go into the decision to finally come out. So I would say it's a choice to live an openly authentic life, but it's not a choice to be a member of the LGBTQ community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have one more question for you, Mitch, and it's a harder question. I think we left the hardest questions for the very last, but this is one that comes up a lot. So we hear a lot of people say that trans people are just mentally ill. What is your answer to that?
I always begin when I'm talking about mental illness in general by letting people know that I by no means am like a mental health professional. I work alongside some amazing mental health professionals through Family Counseling Service of the Finger Lakes who have had many conversations and affirmed a lot of things for me. But to tell a transgender person that their transgender identity is a mental illness is kind of like Amy was just talking about, incredibly dangerous rhetoric. Being transgender, having a transgender identity, or a gender identity at all that differs from what role you were assigned at birth has nothing to do with mental illness and everything to do with personality and sense of self. So people use, and for years in our history, it was framed through the lens of colonialism that to deviate from the assigned role of a male or assigned role of a female was a mental illness. A lot of people were institutionalized for, those tendencies, as well as homosexuality, which we well know and is very well documented. The thing about transgender identity being looked at as a mental illness in modern culture is that a lot of institutions and a lot of systems require a diagnosis of it as being a mental illness in order for people to access the healthcare and supports that they need to meet their transition goals, which in the current moment is, I would call it a necessary evil because the system is built that way and people need to be able to access care now. But as we continue to overhaul systems and build better systems, and I hope that through my lifetime, systems are continually being changed and adapted to meet the needs of the people, I'm optimistic that that will go away. I can't tell you how many times I have been asked to help a student who is transgender have access to the right bathroom, or even have access to housing, or even be allowed to participate in school events or certain clubs. And the school comes back at, well, we need a doctor's signature for any accommodation to be made for this individual, because otherwise how do we know that they're not just saying that, which doesn't happen and is incredibly vicious gatekeeping and a way to really, again, basically tell someone that you know who they are better than they do. Also, like I was saying earlier, not every trans person has access to healthcare. They don't all want it, but not every person has access to healthcare either. So for a situation too, where someone is a youth who lives in an unsafe home environment, to be told that in order to be safe at school, they have to have a doctor's signature, when they would have to have their parent take them to the doctor, and then the parent would be able to find out why they went to the doctor if they were under the age of 18. You're just asking to put a child in a violently dangerous situation. So it's not only wrong to say that transgender people are mentally ill and to classify it as a mental illness in order for transgender people to access care, it is incredibly dangerous. And in the past, it has been done this way on purpose as a means of violence and discrimination. I think we're getting away from that being the direct intent, but that is the impact of statements and these requirements. So if you are a professional in an institution like a school or a college or a healthcare office who has concerns about the way your policies are worded and the way that you handle those situations, and especially if you're a trans person who's in one of these situations, definitely reach out to me. I am here to advocate for you. I know Title IX inside out and backwards, and I am here to do everything I can to make sure that you are being given your rights and treated appropriately and safely, no matter what position you are in. So that's very serious, but important to talk about.
Absolutely.
Similarly, my last question for you, Amy, is very serious as well. There's kind of an assumption that a lot of people make that domestic violence and intimate partner violence doesn't happen in same-sex relationships. What's your take on that?
So that's completely false. When I took my position in the agency as a domestic violence victims advocate a couple of years ago, my first case actually ended up being a same-sex relationship. The assumption is made, especially among same-sex women, female relationships, is that women are smaller, they're more they're quieter, they're more reserved. Domestic violence isn't always physical, and it does not rely on size and strength in order to be perpetrated. So a lot of times in same-sex relationships, you see more domestic violence along the lines of emotional and verbal and financial and cultural. If you're not out to your family and your partner knows that, your partner can use that against you and threaten to out you to your family and your friends. There's a lot of verbal and emotional that goes into it. Being called names all the time, being put down constantly, being put down in front of your family and your friends, being forced to tell your partner where you've been, who you've been with, and why, being forced to turn over receipts to your partner so they can account for all the money you're spending, having to turn your paychecks over to your partner. Domestic violence at its root is about power and control. So somebody who is perpetrating domestic violence is going to do what they need to do to get that power and control over their partner. So domestic violence absolutely happens between same-sex couples, and it is incredibly dangerous to perpetuate the myth that it does not happen, because it does, and not talking about it makes you in more danger. And it's really important to know the resources around you. Our agency has multiple domestic violence victims advocates. Even though I'm the coordinator of our LGBTQ center now, a lot of my training and my specialty lies within domestic violence. I was just trained to write orders of protection even. So I've really got my hand in that. And we've got a 24-hour hotline that people can reach us on. And it's vital to know the resources around you, because a lot of people don't take domestic violence as seriously when it is a same-sex relationship. And they especially don't take it as seriously when it's a female perpetrator, because women are inherently seen as weaker by society and hysterical and emotional and all those nasty things that toxic masculinity fuels. And it's a really important discussion to have. And it's a really important thing to know about, because it's really important to know what red flags to look for. And actually in our description of their video, I'm going to put a link to our website and to a website about red flags. And I'm going to put our hotline up because it's crucial that people know that it exists, and we know that it exists, and we're here to help.
Thanks, Amy. And that's true too for male same-sex relationships as well. Absolutely, DV is still possible in those relationships, and you deserve help. You deserve to be reached and cared for and helped and supported. So no matter what, our agency is going to help you. So that's true too with transgender people. A lot of times transition is used as like an outer, like the transphobia and homophobia becomes like an outer ring around the wheel of different ways that a perpetrator exacts power and control. And no matter what, like, we are here to help. like Amy said, she is going to plug the domestic violence hotline number in the description of this video. But also, I will just share with you right now, too, that the number is 1-800-695-0390. And that is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We all rotate, and we are really proud of our domestic violence advocacy team. We work with some really amazing and fabulous people who are going to do what they need to do to help you. So you can trust that you will be affirmed and met with support and care by anyone on our team.
Absolutely.
So the other part of all of this myths and stereotypes, to kind of like get back on a little bit of a goofy train, is I was saying to somebody recently that really like randomly being hit with the urge to dye your hair blue and just like doing it feels like it's transgender culture at this point, because so many of my trans identified friends, including me, obviously, have done it so many times. And that's kind of a stereotype, and, you know, isn't true for everyone. And stereotypes are just assumptions that we make about people based on their actions or things that they do that aren't true and that can be dangerous tools. So even though like there are some stereotypes that we think are no-brainers and that may be rooted in truth for people we've interacted with, that doesn't mean they're always going to be true. But we just wanted to talk about some of the stereotypes, especially some of the goofier ones that exist for our communities, and kind of debunk that as well.
Yeah. So the other thing about stereotypes and making assumptions is that people seem to believe that gaydar is a thing.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's not a thing. And so people use these stereotypes to be like, oh, well, she's whatever, she must be a lesbian, or, you know, oh, he's whatever, he must be gay. So it's really important to know that gaydar is a myth. Like the only thing that you can tell about a person when you look at them is that they happen to like the clothing that they're wearing and they have that kind of hair. That's it. That's all you can tell about a person.
And it means nothing other than that's what they're wearing that day.
Right. So some of the funnier ones that we were talking about, and I'll tell you my favorite one right off the cuff, and there is some truth to this. I was at a beer crawl with my partner and my neighbors, and we were talking about what we call the lesbian head nod. So when a woman sees another woman that they think might be same sex attracted, we do this tiny little just like a little head jerk, and it's almost imperceptible, but if you know it, you know it. And so my friend and her boyfriend were visiting, and so we were all talking about it, and my friend was like, "Nuh-uh, that's not a thing." So we pulled my neighbors out of a conversation, and we're like, hey, show her the lesbian head nod. And they both did it without any prompting. And then there was another couple across the way, and they were coming this way. And so we were like, can you really fast, just show the lesbian head nod? And they did it immediately. So it's a really funny assumption or stereotype or whatever you want to say, that there's a specific head nod. And the important thing is that there is some truth in all of these things, but it's not the inherent truth, and it's not always a given that if you do this, you are this, because some people might just be how they greet people, but we have noticed that disproportionately it is women doing it to other women, which is why we joke and call it the lesbian head nod. And it is a really funny thing to joke about, but we want you to know that while we are laughing about these things, it's not a given that a person fits into this category just because they do that thing.
So what are some other lesbian stereotypes that
we all drive Subarus, which is not true. I had a Mazda and then a Jeep, and my partner had a Jeep and now a truck. So that's not all true. We don't all drive Subarus. We don't all love cats. More people actually love pit bulls and dogs than they do cats. I happen to be an outlier in that I've never met a cat I haven't loved. But that's another myth. Another myth is that we're all vegetarian or vegan, which like you're gonna pry fresh mozzarella out of my cold dead hands. So we are not all vegetarian or vegan. What are some other ones that we move very quickly? The old joke is that you bring a U-Haul to the second date. I don't know many people that this is true for. Historically, I think it came about because it wasn't as widely as accepted as it is now. So when you found somebody that you were safe and comfortable with, your immediate thought was like, well, I can't let this one go. So you started sharing everything about your lives together because it was one of the only people you knew about that would be safe to do that with. So it's a funny stereotype now because it's not true, but it has roots in like a sadder history, I guess.
Yeah. There's also like, right, that a lot of people assume that if a woman is wearing plaid, like a plaid flannel, or has short hair, then she must be a lesbian. And that's just not correct.
Pixie cuts and plaid are in style right now. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like people can wear what they want.
Right. What are some stereotypes that you have to bust?
Well, so like, again, some things are very much like rooted in things that we actually do. Like there's a lot of, I do that when we see, and like one of my favorite things about trans culture is being a member of trans meme pages, because it's really hilarious how many of us have had the same shared experience with things, and it's a way that we bond with each other and that we joke with each other that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate coming from someone who is not part of the community. But like a big one that I love to bring up is that trans men and non-binary people specifically, when they're figuring out their true name, they tend to like immediately go to like natural names, like things like fawn or like clover. Like I know so many people who specifically like botanical names, like forest or ivy, things like that. And I think that probably comes from the fact that, like, I know when I was growing up, the name Ivy was a name that I like loved. And when I was working on figuring out what my name was, like we all kind of try names on at different points. Some of the ones that like I had thought about at the time were definitely stereotypical names, but I ended up going traditional because Mitchell means made through God's plan, actually, which like is how I feel about my transition and becoming who I really am. Is that it was part of the plan for my life anyway. So it fits, but that's definitely a big joke. We also joke about the fact that we're all either eldritch horrors or cryptids. And we end up getting like really connected to like Mothman, specifically Mothman, but also like we're all like out here shooting for the Loch Ness Monster. It's a very common thing to like in our community to like know people who are like really invested in cryptozoology, like so much so that I get ads almost every day for this one specific cryptozoology like 6-week course that you pay like $200 and then you're like certified. And honestly, I've thought about it as professional development because it's a great way to connect with my community. But I got pride to worry about right now. More like less funny stereotypes that come from cis people, not from trans people, is that trans people are inherently angry people and not nice people to get along with and not friendly, and they're just going to yell at you. That's not true. And if a trans person is yelling at you, maybe take a minute to think about how you're treating them. But they're also not obligated to teach you. Right. Like it's something that like, please, use your resources. Google is available and you can really like get a lot of good education without expecting a trans person to teach you, with the exception of me, of course, because this is my job. And another one is that trans people get like really, really up in people's faces about, did you just assume my gender, or you're not using my pronouns? And some people have the confidence and like the safety, like sense of themselves that they will call people out when that happens. And those are amazingly resilient and strong people. But a lot of the time when you do things like that to a trans person, you've just identified yourself as not being safe, and they're going to just shut down and probably cut you off. Like, I know that with myself, when people commit to using my dead name, which is the trans word for the name that we were assigned at birth, or insist on using my old pronouns and do so repeatedly over a period of time, even after some gentle correcting, I don't get mad. I don't call them out on it. I just slowly and quietly cut them out of my life because I don't need that. So those are stereotypes too. We also I feel like with the entire LGBT community, there's an assumption that we're all vegan, which is not true. It's true for some of us though, but definitely not me. I'm with you on the mozzarella thing.
Yeah, not happening.
Yeah. And then there's stereotypes too that a lot of trans folks went to art school, which it's funny because I went to art school. But the real the takeaway message here for both Amy and I is that one of the amazing things about the LGBT community, and something that is very important to us, is that this is a beautifully diverse community, and there are so many different ways to be exactly who you are, and no two people are the same, and using things to make assumptions about people who haven't explicitly told you who they are is going to prevent you from getting to know people who are truly amazing and wonderful in an authentic way that is going to enable you to develop a relationship with some pretty fantastic people. I am really lucky that in my travels and my adventures, I've formed an incredibly diverse chosen family of people. And there's no two of us in my chosen family that are even remotely the same person, because that's not how being a person works. I think I'm sure that Amy, you have seen this too. Our culture kind of wants people to all be the same. That's kind of how we were molded growing up. Mm-hmm. And the modern LGBTQ movement no, we don't have time for that, because that's just not possible, first of all. And also, why would we want that? We're all different, and isn't that something to celebrate? We think it is.
Absolutely. And I mean, next month, we've talked about it a little bit, but next month is going to be a month-long celebration of diversity and being different. So, we're here, we see you, and just got to celebrate who we are, because we've spent a lot of time being told not to, and it's not going to stick anymore. Yeah. So we'll be back probably mid next week with another video. But in the meantime, comment on this video if you think of any stereotypes that we missed, or if there are any other myths that that you thought of that maybe we could do another video like this. We are going to link the two articles that we got some of our information from, so that you can do a little bit of further reading. But it's very easy to find information on the internet. So happy research, and we'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, have a great weekend, guys.
Bye.
Bye.